He was 5 years old when the world gave up on him, but he refused to give up on himself. The rain fell like punishment the night he was left behind. His feet were bare, his shirt soaked, and his hands trembling as he stood under a flickering street lamp. No one looked back. No one said goodbye. In that silence, a 5-year-old boy became invisible. He waited. For hours. For someone. For anything. But all he got was the cold. The first night on the streets broke something inside him, but it also lit something else. He found shelter under rusted staircases, inside dumpsters, beneath torn tarps. He was scared, but he learned fast. Hunger became his clock. Fear became his language. And loneliness. It became his shadow. But even in the darkest moments, a strange kind of fire remained in his chest. He began watching people more than talking to them. How they moved. How they ignored. He saw kids laugh through dirty windows, their hands pressed against warmth he'd never felt. He never hated them. He just wondered how it felt to matter. At night, with an empty stomach and cardboard for a blanket, he'd close his eyes and imagine a different life. One with applause. One with victory. Everything changed the night he saw a television through a store window. On screen, a boxer danced like lightning. Powerful, graceful, unstoppable. The roar of the crowd echoed through the glass and into his bones. He mimicked the moves right there on the sidewalk, punching the air, copying the footwork. And for the first time, he smiled, not because of what he had, but because of what he could become. He didn't know what boxing really was. He had no coach, no gloves, no shoes. But in his mind, he had something stronger than all of that. He had vision. From that day forward, every alley became a ring. Every bruise was a lesson. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was training. For what? He didn't know yet. But something inside him told him this path meant more. He was still cold. Still hungry, still alone. But now he had something no one could steal from him. Purpose. The world had thrown him away, but he would fight until it had no choice but to watch him rise. If you believe in stories of hope rising from nothing, hit subscribe and stay with us. This is only the beginning. Some cities raise dreamers. His city raised survivors. The streets were never quiet. They howled with sirens, coughed up smoke, and whispered stories of those who never made it out. He learned the sound of danger, the rhythm of footsteps that meant trouble, and which store owners didn't chase him away. There were no soft corners, no second chances. Just concrete, rust, and struggle. But it was home. He slept under a crumbling bridge behind a junkyard. The air smelled like gasoline and rain-soaked metal. On cold nights, he'd press his back against the warm wall of a laundromat just to stay alive. He watched families walk past, clutching bags, laughing, never seeing him. But instead of bitterness, he felt focus. This life would train him, and he would use every inch of it. There was a gym, hidden between a pawn shop and a liquor store. Its windows were fogged, its walls cracked, but inside he saw fire. Grown men sparred with precision, each jab filled with purpose. The smell of sweat and iron pulled him closer than any meal ever had. He stood at the door every day for weeks, watching, learning, dreaming. One day, the old man who owned the place opened the door. He didn't smile. He just looked the boy in the eye and said, "Clean the mats. Then watch." That was the first lesson. Before you fight, you earn your place. And he did, by sweeping, stacking weights, filling water bottles. He never missed a day, even when it rained, even when he bled. At night, he practiced alone, punching air in abandoned parking lots, using broken mirrors for feedback. His hands bruised, his knuckles tore, but he came back every day, not because anyone asked him to, but because the ring was the only place he felt like he existed. Like he wasn't invisible anymore. The gym became a second home, even if no one said it out loud. The fighters started nodding when he walked in. The old man let him hit the bag. Slowly, he was being shaped, not just into a fighter, but into a man with something to prove. The city still tried to crush him, but now he punched back. His breath began to sync with the rhythm of the place. And beneath the weight of the city, he was building something stronger than muscle. He was building will. He had no name, so he made one with every punch he threw. They called him Steel, not because he was the strongest, but because he never cracked. Pain didn't faze him. Blood didn't stop him. Loss didn't break him. He didn't speak much, but when he stepped into the ring, everyone listened. There was something wild in his eyes. Not rage, but memory. Every jab carried a story. Every hook was a refusal to quit. He fought his first unofficial bout in a basement, with no lights and no rules. It was against a kid twice his size. He won with a right cross that echoed like thunder in that tiny room. The crowd didn't cheer, but he didn't care. The real victory wasn't the knockout. It was proving to himself that he belonged, that the dream wasn't just in his head. From that moment, the grind became sacred. He woke before the sun, ran through the quiet streets while the world slept, did push-ups until his arms shook. He still had no real home, but he had a regimen. He trained like a soldier, fought like a ghost. While others talked, he worked. While others doubted, he prepared. Discipline became his identity. The old trainer noticed. Slowly, he began teaching. No praise, no shortcuts, just instruction. Boxing isn't just fists, he'd say. It's who you are when the lights go out. And the boy listened. Not because he wanted to impress, but because he wanted to grow. The gym became more than a shelter. It became his forge. His first official fight came at 17. He entered under a fake name, wearing borrowed trunks. The crowd barely noticed him until he moved. He was sharp, calculated, explosive. 3 rounds later, his hand was raised. Cameras flashed. Reporters asked, "Who is this kid?" And the name Steele stuck. Not just because of how he fought, but because of what he'd survived. He didn't crave fame. He craved purpose. Each fight paid for meals, equipment, nights in a cheap hostel. But more than that, it fed his momentum. With every win, he proved that destiny wasn't inherited. It was created. One choice at a time. One step, one punch, one round after another. Outside the ring, he read, studied, learned the business. He didn't want to be a broken fighter at 30. He wanted to build something lasting. So he saved money, skipped parties, watched how contracts worked. People mocked his seriousness, but he wasn't just chasing belts. He was building a future. And through it all, he never forgot where he started. The street, the rain, the hunger. He carried those memories like armor, proof that he was still rising, still fighting, still transforming. The world finally noticed him, but the spotlight cast darker shadows than he expected. When his name hit the headlines, everything changed. Endorsements arrived. Sponsors lined up. Promoters smiled with gold in their eyes. He was finally getting the recognition he fought for. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like surveillance. Everyone wanted something. Everyone had expectations. And slowly, the pressure began to strangle the joy. He opened his gym, not for profit, but for purpose. He wanted to give kids like him a place to fight their demons. At first, it worked. Dozens came, trained, grew. But one night, he got a call. A teenager he mentored had overdosed in an alley near the same bridge he once called home. It broke him. He blamed himself. He saw his own reflection in that boy's collapse. His next fight was sloppy. He was slower, distracted. The critics noticed. He's losing his edge. They said. Fans speculated. Was he burnt out? Had the street finally caught up with him? He said nothing. But inside, the doubt screamed. For the first time, he questioned whether the fight had cost too much. Then came the final blow. The city announced plans to demolish his gym. A new luxury complex was coming. They gave him 30 days. He stared at the eviction notice in disbelief. The very place that gave him purpose. Taken. His fists couldn't fight bureaucracy. His heart couldn't process the loss. He tried to raise funds, launched campaigns, called in every favor. But the interest had shifted. The media wanted drama, not depth. He was no longer the underdog, no longer new. And in that shift, the silence around his mission grew louder. Doors closed. Promises faded. The gym's days were numbered. He stopped training, canceled appearances, sat alone in the dim light of the ring where it all began. People around him said he needed to focus on boxing. You can't save everyone, they warned. But that wasn't the point. The fight wasn't about titles anymore. It was about meaning. And if he lost that, what was left? He faced the hardest question of all. Had he come this far just to watch everything fall apart? And just when he was ready to walk away, the past walked back through the door. Sometimes, salvation comes quietly, from someone who never forgot your fire. He was sitting in the ring, staring at the peeling ceiling, when the gym door creaked open. The trainer, older now, slower, but still carrying that unshakable presence, walked in with something under his arm. No greeting, no small talk, just a nod. Then, he placed an old notebook in the center of the ring. "You're not done," he said. "You've barely started." The silence that followed hit harder than any punch. The notebook was full of scribbles, sketches, ideas, and signatures. Plans to transform the gym into a non-profit foundation. It wasn't new. The old man had been working on it quietly for years. But he never had the right fighter. "Until you," he said. That night, they didn't talk about boxing. They talked about building, about healing, about legacy. Something inside him reignited. Not adrenaline, conviction. He launched a video the next day. No lights, no polish, just truth. He told his story, raw and honest. No drama, no fame chasing. Just a boy who had nothing and found everything in a broken ring. The response was overwhelming. Donations came in from strangers. Fighters from around the world reached out. Celebrities shared it. Kids messaged saying they'd started training. A famous architect offered to design the new space. It snowballed. But more than money, it brought back meaning. It reminded him why he started fighting in the first place. Not for belts. Not for headlines, but for impact. For the kid he used to be, and every other one out there still fighting alone. The gym didn't just survive, it transformed. They built a study room, a kitchen, a therapy space. Coaches came, volunteers cooked meals. It became a place where fists were only used in the ring, and voices were finally heard. And through it all, he trained again. Not for his next fight, but to be strong enough to carry this new purpose. He started mentoring not just boxers, but lost souls. Kids with court cases, addictions, trauma. He didn't preach. He listened, and in their eyes, he saw fragments of himself. He knew he couldn't save them all, but he also knew that even one mattered. That was enough. That was everything. People around him said he was changing. Softer, calmer, but he knew better. He wasn't soft. He was solid, grounded, focused. For the first time in his life, he wasn't running. He was building. With his fists, yes, but also with his mind, his voice, his story. And it all began because someone believed in him. quietly, consistently, and completely. The greatest opponent he ever faced wasn't in the ring. It was the boy inside who still didn't feel worthy. The success returned. He fought again, won again. But this time, the spotlight didn't consume him. It didn't define him. After every match, he returned to the gym, to the kids, to the silence. That balance, that peace. It was new, strange at first, but it grew. He found a rhythm not built on adrenaline, but on purpose. He no longer lived to fight. He fought to live. And yet, healing wasn't linear. Some nights, he still woke up breathless, haunted by the rain, the cold, the silence. He didn't hide from it anymore. He faced it. With therapy, with journaling, with quiet walks before dawn. He even began writing letters to his younger self, to his mother, to the people who abandoned him. Most were never sent, but each one set him free. He shared his truth with the kids he trained. Not the version polished for cameras, but the raw story. The fear, the loneliness, the mistakes. And they listened. Not because he was famous, but because he was real. They saw their own stories in his. And in his strength, they found permission to heal too. He laughed more, slept better, cooked meals for the kids, sat with them when they cried. He became the man he always needed when he was small. Not a savior, a presence. Steady, reliable, real. That was his new power. Not in the ring, but in the quiet between punches. One day, while organizing old gear, he found the shoes he wore during his first real fight. Torn, faded, soaked in memory. He held them like relics. They weren't just fabric. They were proof that you could come from nothing, that the streets didn't have the final word, that broken beginnings can still lead to powerful lives. He didn't need headlines anymore. He turned down interviews, focused on building, teaching, learning. He brought in therapists, educators, financial advisors. The gym became a launchpad, not for fighters, but for futures. He wanted every kid who walked in to walk out better, stronger in body, mind, and soul. The boy who once begged for food now led a community with his bare hands and full heart. And while his body still fought in the ring, his true battle was already won, because he had finally answered the one question that haunted him: am I enough? And the answer was yes, always had been. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't redemption, it's reconnection. It happened unexpectedly. He was speaking at a fundraiser for at-risk youth, standing in front of hundreds, telling the same story he once whispered to himself in the dark. And then he saw her, in the back of the room, frozen, her eyes wide, glassy, terrified and tender. After all these years, after everything, it was her, his mother. They didn't speak that night. Not really. She handed him a letter with trembling hands and disappeared into the crowd. But the moment lingered, burned. Conflicted emotions surged. Rage, confusion, longing. He read the letter alone in the gym. Her words weren't perfect, but they were honest. She was young, lost, scared. She regretted everything. Days passed before he responded. When they finally met, there was no screaming, just silence and small steps. He brought her to the gym, not to impress, but to share, to let her see what he had built. She wept watching the kids train, laugh, heal. "You made this," she whispered, "without me." And he nodded. He didn't need her to complete him, but her presence no longer shattered him. He invited her to one of his final fights. She sat ringside, hands over her heart. When he raised his gloves in victory, he looked at her and didn't feel pain. He felt peace, not because she was there, but because he no longer needed her to validate him. He had already found everything he thought he lost in himself. He forgave her, slowly, not as a gift to her, but as a release for himself. Forgiveness became a kind of freedom, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't erase scars, but stops them from bleeding. And in doing so, he stepped fully into the man he had fought so hard to become. People said it was a miracle that she came back. But he disagreed. The real miracle was that he had stayed whole, that he had risen from the ashes without turning to stone, that the boy who once waited in the rain didn't disappear. He had just been waiting for a day like this. Now, when he stood in the ring, it wasn't about fighting anymore. It was about finishing, not with violence, but with grace, with closure, with strength, the kind that doesn't hit back, but holds steady. And as he hugged his mother outside the gym one evening, he realized the final truth. The fight was never against her. It was always for him. Real power isn't in the punch, it's in the purpose behind it. Strength is often confused with force, with silence, with never showing weakness. But he learned the opposite. Real strength was feeling everything and still moving forward. It was breaking down, then rebuilding with bare hands. It was looking in the mirror and accepting every scar, every flaw, every forgotten moment, and saying, "I'm still here." He became more than a fighter, more than a mentor. He became a mirror, showing others what was possible. That pain didn't have to define them. That being lost didn't mean being unworthy. He showed that you could turn poverty into power, loneliness into leadership, and survival into service. The gym became more than a training space. It became a sanctuary, a lighthouse, a heartbeat in the middle of a city that still tried to swallow people whole. And in that rhythm, he found something deeper than victory, legacy, not trophies, but people, changed lives, a ripple of resilience. His story went beyond boxing. It became curriculum, a film, a movement. But he stayed grounded. He still swept the floors, still taped hands, still sat quietly with new kids who were too afraid to speak. Because he knew the truth. Sometimes just being there is enough to save someone. He taught them how to fight, but more importantly, how to feel, how to heal, how to believe. He told them, "You're not what happened to you. You're what you choose to become." And they listened, not because of his record, but because of his presence, his proof. Now, when people ask him what the biggest fight of his life was, he smiles gently. It wasn't any opponent, not the streets, not the system. It was the fight to not give up on himself, to not become bitter, to keep dreaming when the world told him to stop. Because in the end, the boy who was left behind didn't just survive. He became a legend, not in the ring, but in the lives he helped lift. If this story touched something in you, subscribe for more. We believe that every scar has a story, and every story has the power to change a life.